Mercedes' Valtteri Bottas had another forgettable race despite dominating every session until the final qualifying and the race itself. Teammate Lewis Hamilton once again prevailed and further put the championship out of Bottas' reach. Former F1 driver turned commentator Martin Brundle has now sympathised with Bottas in his column at Sky Sports. I'm your host Dillon Shelley, and first up on Formula World, Bottas should leave Mercedes if Hamilton re-signs. Brundle began by analysing Bottas' weekend. Bottas had dominated every practice session and most of qualifying until the one segment which mattered the most, the top 10 shootout in Q3. At which point Hamilton chose to fuel up and have two shots at a final banzai lap to steal pole position and demote Bottas to the dirty side of a slippery grid. He then pointed out how Bottas would have enjoyed far more success had Hamilton not been his teammate. Poor guy, if Hamilton wasn't around he'd be a megastar. Instead, he just has to take questions on basically what went wrong. I find it uncomfortable to interview him immediately after a race, looking in his eyes to see a mix of fading adrenaline and disappointment, trying to find the right words to tread a middle ground of celebrating another podium while he's been trounced again by his teammate. He summed up his thoughts on how Bottas may need to look elsewhere despite currently driving for the fastest team in F1. If you're going to have to fight Hamilton, then it might as well be in the equal fastest car. But if Lewis re-signs for multiple years, then Valtteri will surely have to look elsewhere on the grid for his own self-esteem and motivation. Fast feed. Former F1 driver Jacques Villeneuve feels that it was a huge gap between Ferrari Charles Leclerc and Vettel, and it was humiliating to see that difference. He further thinks that Vettel just drives because he has to, but he is tired and not happy at all. This is how his year will end. Sidelined F1 driver Nico Hülkenberg divulged that he is waiting for a call from Helmut Marko, Red Bull's team advisor. Racing Point's Sergio Perez, meanwhile, feels that Hülkenberg certainly deserves a place on the Formula 1 grid next year. Valtteri Bottas has stated that if he gives up, it won't ever be possible to beat Hamilton, and that will be the biggest mistake to do. Williams' George Russell has joked that he felt a bit like former F1 driver Pastor Maldonado during the opening laps in Portimao with the car slipping and sliding. Red Bull's Alex Albon feels that there were some tyres that clearly switched on for some teams, McLaren and Kimi. Kimi was flying, it looked like he was on a different track. McLaren's Carlos Sainz has stated that he always tries to embrace tricky conditions instead of getting a bit too cautious. Renault's Daniel Ricciardo feels that Portimao was a bit of damage limitation for him and his team. AlphaTauri's Franz Tost pointed out that the team has now scored points in 9 consecutive races, which is a good record for them. Racing Point team principal Otmar Safnauer has wondered, don't the fans want to see good and hard racing? Where does it lead this sport if we now warn our drivers for fair and safe racing, after Sergio Perez earned a warning for blocking Gasly? He also feels that Lance Stroll did not deserve his penalty for his incident with Lando Norris, as it was just a racing incident. He further thinks there must simply be more constant decisions, and that Max Verstappen deserves a similar ruling as he was off the track and came back into the path of Sergio Perez on the first lap. FIA race director Michael Massey, meanwhile, has explained that they are less strict in the first lap. If the Perez-Verstappen incident had happened later, they would have at least started an investigation. If Hamilton re-signs with Mercedes, should Bottas look elsewhere? Head over to my community page to vote in the poll and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe and check out my others for all the latest in the world of Formula 1.